patriotism, faith, national unity, education, fiscal responsibility, civility, the values that define America. Fascinating stories and talks from America-loving patriots dedicated to preserving freedom, opportunity, and justice. Welcome to the Friends and Fellow Citizens podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 100 of Friends and Fellow Citizens. I'm your host, Sherman Tylawsky. Thank you all so much for joining me this week. I'm very, very excited for this milestone because we made it. We have made it to episode 100. This is a week that I've been thinking about for a while now, and it's just hard to imagine how far we have come with this program, hitting number 100 on Friends and Fellow Citizens. Mark your calendars, July 18th, 2022, we made it to episode 100. First of all, I really cannot begin to thank all of you, our Patreon supporters, our listeners, our subscribers, our email subscribers, friends, family, acquaintances, colleagues, so many people to thank. And it really is such a wonderful feeling to be able to take every single week and be able to have that opportunity to speak to such a wonderful audience. I'm so humbled to be able to do this program, and it really just goes to show how it really takes a village to make this happen. When I started this podcast 2+ years ago, this was right around March, April 2020, I did not even imagine that I was even going to have a podcast until I started having a conversation or two with friends and family about a podcast, about something that I wanted to do. There were so many things that I wanted to share. There were so many ideas that I wanted to explore, and there were so many great guests and great people I wanted to speak with, but I didn't want to just keep it within me. I really wanted more than just myself and my small cohort of family and friends. I wanted to really extend as much as I can beyond the recording studio and out into the airwaves of the podcast world. I really just am starting to think about all of the wonderful episodes that we have done. We've had 50 plus people as guests on our program. We've had basically, if you listen to Friends and Fellow Citizens straight, you could cross one end of the country to the other straight if you were to drive straight, and you can make it back probably about halfway across the country. Again, that is how much Friends and Fellow Citizens recording there is. It's really extraordinary. We really have, I think, made such huge progress since episode 1. I knew that on August 30th, 2020, that my life was going to change. And I did not expect to see all this amazing support from all different kinds of people. When I think about that time when I thought about the podcast, I still remember those old times when I was thinking about the name, which is a whole other ordeal. I went through dozens of names. I remember purchasing the equipment, the recording equipment for this podcast. I remember designing the logo, which took so much effort, a lot of thinking, and just in creating a content, there's a lot of creating, a lot of scrapping too. There was so much that we went through, and just to set up this podcast. And now in episode 100, I'm absolutely thrilled at what we've been able to achieve over the last 2 years. I am so appreciative of the fact that we've been able to do so much in less than 2 years. And I am so excited to celebrate this moment with you and to be able to celebrate this together in one podcast. And today we've got a couple announcements and some people who are going to come on to this program. Some are familiar faces, of course. And this is just going to be the most important thing I want to take away for this episode is to thank all of you, but also to just celebrate all the episodes that we have done to this point. Whether it's podcasts about foreign policy or on a viral video or leadership, of history, of sometimes even about just lifestyle, about fiscal responsibility or how big $1 trillion is. We've really been able to explore so many different subjects through one common theme, which is about the principles of Washington's farewell address: patriotism, faith, national unity, education, fiscal responsibility, and civility. I've been so surprised and so thrilled to see that these principles, as you've probably seen through the episodes that you've listened to, whether you're a first-time listener or you listened to episode 1 all the way till now, I hope you've seen how there's so many examples in our world today and in the past that can help us build a stronger country. And you see that these principles are still around and that there are still so many people out there who are willing to serve for the general public and serve for their country. I'm so in awe. So today, what we're planning to do is we are going to first start with some key announcements and key acknowledgments, because there are certain individuals, while there's so many people who are part of this, there are a few key individuals I want to highlight who at the very beginning have been with me since day one, and I want them to have an opportunity to say a few words to our audience. And then we'll get into an interview, kind of like a half interview sort of episode with the first ever guest of Friends and Fellow Citizens. And then I want to get to a conversation that I had with some of the first guests on Friends and Fellow Citizens. We're going to have a bit of a conversation. We're just going to have fun, and a time to relax. It's summertime, and whether you're on the beach or working out or in the kitchen or folding laundry or whatever it is you're doing, I hope that this episode will help cap a amazing stretch. And we really, really want to look forward to those next 100 episodes. And it's going to happen with your help. And I am just so excited. I'm so excited to celebrate this huge achievement together. First off, I want to bring two very, very special guests and two people who have obviously given me life, love, and care. My mother and father have been with me since day one, and I'd like them to come onto the program, share a few words with the audience on this momentous day.
Wow, 100 episodes. Congratulations, Sherman. As a mother, I'm so proud of you. Of course, I know all parents are proud of their children, but it takes a lot of strength and a lot of dedication to really make 100 episodes of a talk show. So I have nothing else to say, but I just want to say congratulations, Sherman, my dear son. I know there will be many, many more of hundreds episodes. Thank you for being a great son.
Hello, this is Sherman's father, Greg. Milestones in our lives are wonderful things, and this 100th episode is certainly a wonderful milestone. I'd like to congratulate Sherman on this wonderful achievement, and I would like to thank everyone who supported his endeavors from start until this 100th grand episode. May you have many more milestones in your life, Sherman. We are all very proud of you, and we thank you for your work, and we look forward to your future work in this realm and in many others for our country. Thank you, Sherman.
Thank you so much, Mom and Dad, for your amazing support and love. I remember those days when I was proposing all those ideas to you about the podcast, and just in 2 years, something can come to fruition. It felt like that moment when you plant a seed and all you think at that time is like, oh, it's just a little seed. How can this thing grow? But over time, you just saw how it grew and grew like a plant and grew into what it is now. The support system that has been with me since I started is truly a blessing. It's a blessing that I would not trade for anywhere else and for anything else. Next, I like to bring in a friend who not only was a great person to go to class with and spend time with when I was in graduate school. We met it back in 2018, and we've been close friends ever since. Even as the last couple years or so, we've only met up with each other in person one time. The first ever guest of Friends and Fellow Citizens is Denzel Johnson, and he is absolutely an incredible person. One who has brought a lot of joy and a lot of inspiration for me. And this podcast would not be possible without the first guest. I truly believe that, not just for the interview episodes, but for the podcast. And I'd like to take this time to interview my friend once again as we sit down, reflecting on a little bit about episode 2, technically. Episode 2 was the first interview episode. Think about episode 2 and just reconvening again 98 episodes later. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am very, very excited to have the first ever guest of Friends and Fellow Citizens on to Friends and Fellow Citizens, now episode 100. So it's been a little while since we had our episode 2 as the first guest episode of our podcast. Very excited to have Mr. Denzel Johnson, aka Mr. Aloha, to our podcast. Denzel, thank you so much for coming on for episode 100.
Aloha! Thank you for having me, Sherman. It's great to be back. Always great to be back on the podcast and discuss a lot of different issues with you. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Well, let's look back. Let's fast. I was going to say fast forward. We'll rewind back to April 2020-ish, March 2020, right when COVID was happening. And you remember some of those conversations we had about the podcast, or just really just what we were going to do during this shutdown. And I'll never forget that conversation we had on our way to Costco, because Costco is the way to rescue yourself, I guess, of all kinds of trouble. But tell us about what you recall from our interactions and conversations about just the idea of the podcast way back in April or March 2020.
Well, I just thought it was interesting. I remember we were, of course we, made that trip, at least once a month to Costco. Of course, gotta have the Costco pizza. I mean, you gotta have it, and always have a good conversation on the road. And I just thought it was interesting that you were entertaining the idea, because in my head, at least from what I've seen thus far in graduate school, just knowing you, not just professionally, but personally as a friend, you talk about a podcast like that, I'm like, oh yeah, like this would be like really cool. Like, I mean, this would be really cool. Like, if you could kind of kick it off, and then even just kind of watching you as you just, I remember, a few weeks later after that discussion, you had sent, me and our group, some like logo ideas and just like name ideas. So, and then like when we eventually had the first podcast, the episode and discussing that, I was like, wow, this is not that I was like, people say like, wow, like, oh, I can't believe you did it. But it's like, wow, like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, I mean, wow, like I had always believed you could accomplish this, you could do it. Which is kind of interesting to see, that which you desire come into fruition. And it's inspiring to, others, not just like from like a politics, civic standpoint, but for other people who have different passions that they, want to manifest into some kind of project. Of course, for years is really into politics, civics. I for one, I'm interested in that realm as well. But I'm, of course, interested in also like, you know, um, strength training and fitness and nutrition and stuff like that. So just to see your passion come to fruition as like a project is honestly really amazing. It's like, dang, so good on you, man.
Well, thank you so much for your kind words, Denzel. And I always say this, but it really takes a village. I always say that it's important for people like yourself and all the guests that we've had. We've had over 50 guests on the show already, and it's really remarkable just to see that depth and breadth of people coming on, and you really starting that trend. You're starting that. It just takes that first guest, right? And then there's that second one and that third one. It just keeps going. And I remember thinking about, the first guest I was going to have. And honestly, that first one I was thinking about was yourself, man, because we were talking about the podcast and just the ideas of, I guess, something that involved conversation, right? Just talking about something for an hour. So what motivated you to accept my invite based on the things that we did, based on the things that we said? What sort of things were you kind of looking forward to, or some things that maybe you were not expecting a whole lot? I believe you were also kind of the de facto, if I should say, guinea pig of the podcast outline format, which is something that I use to for all of my guests on my program.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think just as you're talking and I'm kind of sitting here listening and thinking about, of course, everything that happened. I mean, honestly, I guess my thoughts were, well, first of all, I was just really honored, honored that you would ask me and to discuss the topic we discussed, about Middle Eastern politics and related issues. Because you could have asked anybody, right? I'm not a, necessarily a Middle Eastern politics SME or expert. Of course, I've taken the same classes you've taken, in graduate school, so I know just as much about that, or you probably know much more about that. But yeah, definitely honored it. I think, it was just kind of cool to think about as like it's kind of strange to say this, but like subconsciously, like as I'm talking and during the podcast, like subconsciously knowing that, like, oh wow, like this is gonna be like a platform where people can like become educated and learn more and more about these various topics, right? So even with the format, I really appreciated how, everything you've done, with the podcast thus far, it really reflects like your character and what I know about you as a person, just through grad school, through hanging out, one on one, having everything ready, saying the questions ahead of time, um, having like, just the introduction set up and, just really setting the groundwork, setting the foundation for the podcast. So, um, really enjoyed it. I think just knowing that you are creating a platform to educate people is really amazing, honestly. And like I said, honored that you'd ask me to be a part of this project that you're having, this passion. Like I said, it kind of inspires me to like develop some of my passions further.
Well, it's just such an amazing opportunity to connect. As you were saying, I think something you alluded to, which is there's also that element of personal connection too, especially when you're able to find an opportunity to meet someone in person. A lot of the guests I've never met in person, but it just becomes a spark or an opportunity to, it's like, man, if you're ever in Nevada, if you're ever in DC or wherever, I'd love to meet up with you. And for you and me, after graduation, really, we did not see each other in person for nearly 2 years. And finally, just a few months ago, we met up in where you are right now in Omaha, Nebraska. So, because everything just lined up, the stars lined up, as the saying goes. And uh, and I want to touch upon some of the things that you're working on right now, or just overall kind of a life update, if you like. But one thing that I always say is I wanted this podcast to be unique, and that I didn't want to just be another civics podcast as much as I could. Really wanted to be based on Washington's principles and on that farewell address that George Washington delivered in 1796, which was really a message for citizens in 1796 all the way to the present day, and in the long future. So my question, Denzel, is what in your view, what do you think makes the show unique, and how maybe that's channeled through our guest episodes or the episodes with the signers, which is something we started last year in 2021. Yeah, just any thoughts you have about what you think makes the podcast unique to other podcasts, or just in general, what makes it special?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I think the biggest thing is how your foundation with this podcast is, Washington's farewell address. I remember at least every time I've been on a podcast with you, at least for me, one of the questions like you would ask be like, you know, who's your favorite founding father and why, and those kind of questions, right? So you always find a way to go back to our foundation, to the founders, which of course we're really reflecting on today, being the 4th of July when we're recording this, and yeah, and I think just like in this kind of it's like it's really interesting because like while given that the fact that that is your foundation, like I said, it really guides how you frame certain questions to different people. And even like with, you've had several different people. I mean, well, of course, podcast hundreds, so hundreds of people on your podcast. Of course, more, when you have like a joint podcast with me and others, and just how you were able to bring in just a vast array of people, vast array of experiences, just to discuss different topics. And like the way that the unifying theme is like how you always find a way to just like tie it and relate it all back to the founders at some point during the conversation, to Washington, to the founders, because you can very easily be like, all right, sounds good, guys. Like I'm just gonna, I'm gonna make a podcast, and it's gonna be about history stuff, American history, and yeah. And you could do that. You could have like a bunch of different podcasts. You could have just done that. Like talk about one day you talk about race relations, one day you talk about Middle Eastern politics. It's kind of a bunch of random issues, which are related in the sense of being related to politics. But like when you add that spice of like, all right, this is related to this overall theme, foundation of our country, the U.S. Constitution, Declaration of Independence. I think that's what makes it unique. Because I listen to podcasts. I listen to other ones that are on Apple Podcasts that I get very educational and everything like that. But I feel like a lot of it's more informative. In terms of okay, here's like just like here's some information. But I think it just prompts for you. I think I feel like you cause people to think. Right, like you prompt. At least for me too. Like when we're talking, several different occasions, you caused me to think and really get back to our foundation. I think that's the main thing. Like because you can talk about all these issues, you can get still wrapped up in this, that, and the third that's happening. But like when you're able to like kind of reel it in, like okay, let's reel it in a little bit. All right, like now let's talk about the founders. Like let's talk about who your favorite founder was. So. Yeah, honestly, that was to be the biggest one because, like I said, I mean there are, and of course, every single podcast has their strengths and weaknesses, but I think that's the one that sets you apart the most. It's just like what guides you, what the foundation is, and you're following that, you're keeping that foundation strong and not wavering, and like oh yeah, like we can just talk about this. Oh, that'd be cool too. Oh, that'd be cool, So.
Oh, that's great. I think You really put it so much better than how I usually put it. It's really, it really is amazing to be able to have something. I feel like maybe it's what makes it American. I know it kind of sounds strange, and obviously it's because it's very timely since we're recording on the 4th of July, 2022. But it's in America, I feel like we always find that something or something that we just know that's like, oh, that's really American, or that's something that you can't find anywhere else. You can't find George Washington's farewell address anywhere else. And I think just bringing that back to life, and having all those people come in from different backgrounds and all be able to say, there is a connection. We might not have seen each other in person. We might have different views. And certainly I want people to make up their own minds, to have as much information as possible to before they have an opinion on something. But this is the core. This is the core of what I think Washington wanted, and I'm sure bringing it into modern context. I don't, it's always kind of fun because you never know. Like, oh well, sometimes it could be it's super easy because you're talking with someone who knows about the founding fathers or does research on it. And other times you're like, oh, this is from a viral video or from some kind of phenomenon that happened just a few years ago, and yet you were still able to find that core. And Denzel, I know that one of the things that I'm still kind of wrapping my head around as we're recording this is the fact that we are at episode 100. I mean, I honestly never thought I would get to 100 episodes. Certainly, I didn't know I was going to get to this quickly, or at least how fast time has flown when you do it once a week. It's kind of crazy. It's like, 52 weeks in a year. So yeah, you get there in less than 2 years. So, and as we switched to a new schedule with me starting school in Alabama next month, and so having to now do 2 episodes, the first 2 episodes of every month, one interview, one solo episode. What sort of things do you look forward to when it comes to what after episode 100, and really what this milestone I think means to the guests, but most importantly to our listeners?
Yeah, man, I think just, first of all, reflecting on the fact that this is episode 100, I think it just kind of blows me away, man, because I think just, like I said, I always go back to what I said earlier about just like bringing your passion into fruition. And I think the way that you're able to do this, like I said, it's inspiring to other people, at least for myself, to bring, like I said, some of my passions to fruition in some kind of project like this. But it just shows like that you're, the fruit of your labor, you reap what you sow. And you've really, I would imagine that you've spent a significant amount of time on this every week, preparing, and especially when you're trying to get, interviewees, and trying to have a schedule ahead of time and trying to release, episodes. And I know it's just, like a second job, and of course takes a lot of time. So I think it's just a product of your hard work, and that really that, kind of honestly, even though it's like, on a smaller scale, like, the American dream per se, because, with hard work and consistency, and, you can accomplish and achieve what you want to achieve. And you did that, because probably a lot of people could have been like, podcast, it's too hard, man. You can't do that, But you're like, you stick with it. You stuck with it, and here you are today. And as far as like for the next 100 episodes, I think really as you're starting classes and completing your doctorate and meeting different people, I'm just interested to see just more depth in your episodes and some of the questions you ask, because I from what I know about people who go to grad school for their PhDs, it really challenges them intellectually. Master's program was one thing, but a doctoral program is a whole another beast. And I think that there's gonna be times when you're gonna be stretched, big time. I mean, just in general, not just intellectually, but just like having to balance all these things together. But I would think it's also gonna prompt you uh, just on a new wave of just like um, exploring different topics and understand asking different questions. Yeah, and I think this is the thing. Like honestly, like um, you're really good at asking questions. Like you seem to ask the right questions that prompt like just like amazing responses for people. You know, and like you would say like you couldn't do it without people who supported you, and but I think you're the one who like leads the effort in terms of like uh, just yeah framing the context, the questions, um, the battle plan forward. So yeah, I think just as you get smarter and with the working on your PhD, like there's gonna be more and more depth.
Appreciate that so much, Denzel. And you really have, once again, like I said, you really played such an integral role in setting that precedent. And I can't wait to see what comes up in the next 100 episodes. I think the benefit in some ways of having school, doing school and all that, incorporating research into more research into the episodes in terms of the research I'm doing in school, which is very relevant. I'm studying political polarization, kind of narrowing that down a little bit, for the dissertation, but it's such a critical topic and something that I've always been passionate about studying, learning more, and I just can't wait to share that to our audiences and getting more guests on. And I think that the benefit is really, when you have 2 episodes every month, my goal is to also be able to have some longer episodes as well. Since, you can break it, you can now take a whole month to listen to an interview episode. It gives you more time to listen to it and to be able to reflect on it a little bit. And obviously it needs more content. I mean, who doesn't want more content in one episode from our guests? So this is again one of those opportunities that I can't wait for, and it's definitely the busy level. It's certainly going to be up there. The temperature of the busyness will fluctuate, but I absolutely have 100% confidence that this is going to be a great new chapter. Now, the last question I have for you, Denzel, before we wrap up our mini interview is, what are you up to nowadays, and what is something that you're looking forward to as you continue your career back at Stratcom, and just what you intend to what sort of things you're looking forward to as you progress, because I see you progress all the time with your work and your service to our to the defense of our country as well. There's a whole team of people, but you played such an important role in that part of the country. So just anything you'd like to add, and anything you want to leave for our audience before we wrap up.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you asking. I've been, I guess now it's been about a year and a half so far out here in Omaha, and I mean, I work for an intel agency, here at Stratcom, the United States Strategic Command, here, in Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska, and it's been cool, man. I mean, I think just I've just been learning more and more about the importance of national security and defense, and particularly Stratcom's mission, which is really to maintain, their nuclear deterrence mission, their strategic deterrence mission, especially with everything that's going on around the world, Russia and China, and I mean, hopefully, I feel like I'm learning more and more through different events and different discussions we're being a part of, different briefings, different trips to go on. There's a TDY work travel assignment I'm going on this month now. the location. So that should be interesting to learn more just about what we do from the I guess the director that I'm supporting per se. But yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. I've enjoyed it. I love it. Um, hoping to continue to set this foundation. Um, work in federal service in the DoD, and yeah, ultimately, hopefully trying to get an assignment overseas at some point. I mean, that's something I've always been interested in, and of course, I know my agency has a lot of opportunities there. So hopefully that comes to fruition. And this month is promotion season, so hopefully get promoted. That'd be cool, especially with of course inflation. Of course, a little things are get more expensive. So it's like, promotion would be nice right now. So.
I've no doubt about how capable you are, Denzel, and just to reiterate, the work that you're doing, what your department's doing, what your agency's doing, so critical. And obviously, it's a secret of nature, but I don't think the secret of nature means that it doesn't diminish the significance of our national security apparatus. And so I know that you work so hard, and it's just I can't tell you how great it is to have met up with you in person that last trip, because everything had to be lined up. I mean, that timing, not only did I meet you in Nebraska, but we had this event that my family was helping me put together, and you drove all the way down. I thought, it turns out 3 hours is not a deterrent at all. And I was kind of worried. I was like, I know that driving over an hour Hawaii is kind of hard to do because of the size of the islands. But I was like, 3 hours, no problem for this guy. So there you go. Anyway, Denzel, thank you so much for coming on to episode 100. I think this is just such a historic milestone, and really a milestone for the listeners and for the podcast and for the guests as well. It took so much support, and you and some of the other people we're going to have on episode 100 are just some of the people who have been that foundation, that cornerstone of Washington's farewell address, and in terms of the way that it has played a role in this podcast and the vitality that has endured for almost 2 years now. And so once again, Denzel, thank you so much again. And whether it's in Nebraska or here in Nevada, right? I already got Denzel excited about Nevada. So I mean, I don't know how many more miles you're gonna log, just because I'm luring you all the time, or getting you luring all the time to Nevada. But hey, it's only a trip on I-80, and that's all it is. So anyway, appreciate it, and we'll move on to our next segment now. All right, it was my conversation with Denzel, the first ever guest of Friends of Fellow Citizens. I hope you enjoyed that one. Finally, I want to bring together a couple more guests, technically guest numbers 2 and 3. We will have Pat Yaro and Christian Piñeiro back onto the program. I call these guys, by the way, the founding fathers of the podcast, besides me as well. And they have been so gracious enough to be willing to come onto the program. And like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be a bit more relaxing, just very casual, get to learn a little bit about myself and about these other two gentlemen. And without further ado, let's begin. Enjoy. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I'm very happy to welcome Pat and Christian to our program. Gentlemen, first of all, thank you so much for coming on to our program. This is obviously a historic episode. If you can believe it, we have hit 100 episodes, which is still kind of hard to say right now. And I want to touch base with our original guests on Friends and Fellow Citizens. So I'm going to start with Pat this time. And Pat, tell us about what the latest news is about yourself and some of the things that you're looking forward to today.
Well, hi, Sherman. First and foremost, let me thank you for the opportunity. It's a great honor to be back on your podcast. I consider myself a founding father of this podcast, and I can tell you it's an incredible story. The effort you have put in to this project in the last 1.5 years is incredible. And I want to congratulate you and your folks, your colleagues, and all the other interviewees who participated on this podcast. Good job. Just to tell a few words about myself, I'm applying to PhD programs. I still have not finalized what my thesis is going to be. My goal for the next couple of months gonna be finalizing my possible dissertation topic and find a school where I can pursue my PhD. Besides this, I'm a regular guest on several Hungarian news media analyzing U.S. politics, U.S. foreign policy, and unfortunately the war in Ukraine. Also, I have my blog, which I started about a year ago. Currently, I'm working on an article on the U.S. on the Ukraine-Russia war, and the greatest news I have that I published an article in a major Hungarian weekly news magazine on the future of the Republican Party in Texas. Unfortunately, this is in Hungarian, so I don't think the U.S. audience will be able to read it, but it's a great article and it's been fun to write it.
Oh, that's wonderful, Pat. Thank you so much for sharing. And I've read your articles. You have an amazing writing talent, and you got great analysis skills. And I mean, Christian, it's time to learn Hungarian, right? I mean, I think that's what Pat is trying to say here.
I believe it. Yeah, Sherman. Well, first of all, thanks again. Like I always say, it's always a joy to come back and talk to you and catch up with Pat. Since graduating from the Bush School, I know that it's been hard to really kind of reconcile some of those relationships with us kind of being in different parts of the world. But I can always rely on your podcast to help bring us together, and it's always a cherishing moment that I love each moment that I get the chance to come back. I'm still at the District Department of Transportation, so I'm coming up to almost a year now at the agency. Still working in the community relations division, doing a lot of outreach and kind of policy programs for the department, covering wards 3 and 4, so the northwest and north part of the city. It's been an absolute joy. I love every moment of it. Really getting to a chance to talk to stakeholders and build those relationships with the community members to see what projects we're doing as an agency, to let them know, that we're available to help them with city services and resources that they can get, and continue collaborating with the mayor's office and city council members to make sure that we're prioritizing their initiatives as well. And so it's been a great ride. I recently moved over to Gaithersburg as well, so further out into Montgomery County in Maryland, which has been nice to kind of get a little taste of the suburban life as living in the city or working in the city. So that's been fun as well. And also, been busy wedding planning with my fiance as well. We're set to get married on December 17th of this year. So we're really looking excited for that. And it's been busy, but that's also something that we've been talking for a while, and we're happy to kind of launch that as we look for how our careers move forward in that capacity too. So it's been fun.
Well, first of all, congratulations to you, Christian. I remember seeing the news, and I'm very, very happy for you and your fiance. I met her once. She's an amazing person. I believe we met at Denny's. I was with Denny's I believe it was with Pat and Theo, some other guys there, and then we saw you over there. And I mean, it just goes to show, great minds think alike, right?
Denny's can bring the world together.
Yeah, exactly. World comes together in America's diners. That's right. Now I want to go back to Pat here And if we can reflect a bit on the podcast itself, you've obviously, as one of the first guests to be on the program, what is something that you have noticed or something you find interesting about the podcast? And there's a whole range of different guests to choose from, and we don't have to go into specifics here. But what's something that you think maybe makes the podcast unique to you and to the audience?
Well, the first and the most fundamental thing that makes this podcast unique is that it is edited by my friend Sherman. So being able to know the actual person behind the podcast is actually a unique thing for me. The other thing I want to emphasize is the structure of the podcast. The fact that you have solo episodes when you talk about history, when you introduce a topic, when you study and discuss a topic, compared to the other type of episodes when you have an interviewee who is answering your questions, who is an expert in a field. So I think the structure makes it really unique. The other thing I like about the podcast is the large range of guests you have from academia, friends, family, younger people who have more expertise. And I think this makes it a really comprehensive and unique show.
Yeah, and this is something I think I touched on one of my recommendations for your podcast, which I really appreciate, is that there's a slew of diversity in terms of the topics that you talk about, right? I think it's very common that a lot of people can find podcasts related to history or politics that you talk about, and they can kind of run into the same themes, similar kind of people who come on the show. It's kind of it's not very original. And I think what makes your podcast special is that you really go into topics that, the typical person on their day to day, would never really, want and ask about and want to know about. It's just so diverse, and the speakers you get, they come from all walks of life, whether they're, former Bush alums, professionals in, defense or international relations, or even your little bits that you do, talking about just history in general, about some like founding American historical figures, or things that the random kind of day-to-day person just wouldn't think about. And it's knowledge that I think is important. Every aspect of history is vital, no matter how small. And I think you really make those small moments in history that can easily become forgotten a staple part of people's understanding of this country. So that's what I really appreciate the most about it. And I've had numerous friends of mine who I've deferred the podcast to, who are very surprised at the originality of it. And I think that speaks a volume, not just to your podcast, but also you as a person, Sherman. So keep doing what you're doing. I love it.
As we proceed on beyond 100 episodes, that's the idea, right? Is to stick with originality and authenticity, and to hope that people can tune in regardless of their differing views, of our different views. We certainly, as group friends, we have different opinions on various different issues too, but we also coalesce around common values and principles. And that's something that I think can be often lost in the very frenzy nature of today's world. And I one thing, if I reflect on just overall, while I've shared a few words before early on in this episode, but I really like how there, as you were kind of alluding to, Christian, which is every single person has this kind of unique individuality and persona, which is also part of the complex nature of picking guests, really, because you can have two people. One of them could be really great, knows all stuff. The other does too, but one of them maybe has just a different personality. And the tricky thing really is just in life, I've never met a lot of these people. Most of these people most of the guests, I've never actually met in person. I've met you all in person, but it's definitely can be very challenging to find that right person. And for us to be able to get to this point and be able to have so many people really take the time out their busy schedules. A lot of them are incredibly busy. I mean, you wouldn't even believe how how much time, how many activities they fit each day, but it's really really something that meaningful when I see that people take time out of their busy schedules to speak on the program. It's a wonderful feeling, and I'm so grateful once again for the people who are making those choices and to be with us for those episodes. Pat, what's something that, and this is kind of a bit of a freebie here, but what are some things that you or something that you want to see continue or want to see more? Maybe something that like an add-on or something that you think would be beneficial at least for us to consider as we move on, as we think of the next 100 episodes of Friends and Fellow Citizens.
Well, thanks for the question, Sherman. There's only one thing in my mind I want to share with you guys. It would be fantastic to have other Bush Crew elements on the show. Like in every 3 months, somebody not from the founding fathers of this podcast, but somebody else, making sure that our former classmates also have a chance to participate in this beautiful project. I think that would be a really cool thing to do.
Pat brings up a very good point, because there's so much about the Bush School, the school where we all went to get our master's degrees. There's something very unique about that school. And I can't tell you how big of a deal it is to not only get to know you guys, but to also share about the Bush School to other people too, because a lot of people, especially those that reach out, they look at it as like, who's Sherman Tylawsky, right? You gotta find out a little bit about someone. And when someone reaches out to you, say, hey, we want to talk for 50 to 60 minutes, even though I never met you in person. And it's the Bush School has come out almost every single time I've spoken with a guest, and it's just a wonderful opportunity to speak about the namesake, about President George H.W. Bush. And I loved in that 1 year anniversary episode we did last year where we paid a tribute to President Bush. I thought it was wonderful. It was just a great touch to a place where we all met. And if it wasn't for that school, I don't think this would have been possible. Certainly the first few episodes, I don't know how that would have occurred. And so I'm really glad that you brought this up, Pat, because the ability, it's kind of like how with this basis of about the founders, remembering our past, remembering where we come from, and knowing why we are doing the things that we're doing is very vital. So I really appreciate that, Pat. Christian, same question to you. What's something that you want to see continue, or something new that you want to at least explore on the show as we approach and I guess the next milestone, which would be 200 episodes?
Yeah, I know. I think there's a lot of opportunity. You were able to formulate a podcast during a very difficult time across the world, dealing with a pandemic and dealing virtually with people. This obviously would create a little bit more of coordination, but I think it would be phenomenal to, in the future have very like a live audience or do in-person interviews, whether that's, with a video or, we meet somewhere in a casual place and we just chat, have a nice dialogue. I think you have tons of opportunity with a lot of connections you've made domestically and internationally. So I think there's some creative ways that, you can work your magic to kind of make that, a little bit more bountiful in that regard. But I think it's one of those things is that, always reaching out and, getting that diverse set of minds, right. And having the opportunity to just have those conversations. And I think matching names and faces is always a plus. So I'm not sure what your bandwidth is, especially with you going to, University of Alabama, about those time constraints and the flexibility that you'll be able to have. But I think, you're already blowing up, and I think, give it, a couple more years. And I think this can definitely turn into something, world renowned. And I'll always be a fan for that.
Thank you so much, Christian. And you're so kind with your words and your support. And I I think a lot about the basis for the George Washington Institute, which is a new professional speaking organization and business that I started. And we're already getting some gigs going on. And really, around the time when this episode is released, I'll be speaking at a couple of conferences. And I always feel like there's so much more than just like the actual organization or myself. It really is, as we've pointed to about those interview episodes. Who knew that all those episodes could kind of accumulate to something like this, to this point in time, and the experiences. I can't tell. One thing I always tell my friends, and certainly I've told you guys too, but this is a huge learning process for me too. I mean, it seems like I would be the kind of person to recommend this to as many people as possible. Now I know that people have different priorities, different skill levels, but even just getting involved, right? Like with Pat, with what he's doing with his Yaro Politics blog, with Christian, with yourself, with your kind of job and your career, working with all those different stakeholders to rethink transportation. That's one of the things I got from your episodes too, which is rethinking transportation, not just in the form of trains, planes, and automobiles. As amazing of a movie that was back in the 80s. And Pat, obviously with your content, speaking about the different dynamics with European politics. This is obviously incredibly relevant, and bring this relevance, I think, to the general audience, but making it, I think, more actionable in the sense that I don't want people to just say, okay, great, Lincoln, look, great guy, love him. What does this have to do with anything that I'm doing, other than the fact that he's on the penny or on the $5 bill, right? So, and that's always been the big question with civics, is just figuring out what is that next step? What can people do in their lives, whether they want to get into politics or not? What's something that they can do to improve people's lives? And the other question I have, which is, I think it touched upon the subject of making this relevant, or making these subjects relevant. But it's really, I've noticed, as you know, we have 6 values, 6 principles, and we've had people name all 6. We've had people name one or more than the other. The most common one that I've seen so far in 100 episodes is that people are more than ever calling for civility. That is the number one principle that is being cited. And I want to ask Pat, what do you think that means when it comes to the mission of Friends and Fellow Citizens, but also just what that kind of shows about what we need more in our society today?
Well, as we know, we live in the time of division, whether in the United States or in Europe, whether is it internal political division, ideological division, or division between 2 countries like the Ukraine and Russia. People has experienced a lot of tension in our societies in the last 10 to 15 years. The beautiful, peaceful era of the post-Cold War years is over. And I think people really want dialogue. People want to reach out to the other side of the aisle. They want to learn the experience of other people. They want to understand why those people think in a different way. The problem is that we as people, we face hurdles and barriers all the time. And I think the heavily politicized mainstream media, or even like alternative media, is the hurdle. And I think great platforms, great projects like your podcast is a terrific way where you can bring people together, where you can bring ideas together, and people can start a dialogue, and people can start to understand other people's point of views. So I think your job, what you've been doing in the last 1.5 years on this podcast, is a fundamental way to be able to achieve civility again.
Very well said. I absolutely agree, especially about when you were saying how we wanted people to start discussions I don't want one episode to be like, all right, we've solved transportation, or we solved European politics. I mean, gosh, I wish that was the case. I don't know what kind of world that would be, but it's definitely not the real world we're living in when we think that, oh, just one discussion is going to end it all. But you're absolutely right. We want to have audience members and others speak about these issues continuously and work towards progress and for informative policies or legislation, or the change in behavior, the change in attitudes that is going to generate more positive outcome.
Well, Sherman, I think, the cornerstone of your question, and I think what it comes to the kind of the overall theme, is that people really just want to be heard. Even in my experience, just, having, dialogues with others, at the end of the day, we're quick as a country, as a people, to make assumptions of others before actually getting to know who they are. And, civility plays a big role into that. We're always kind of in this tug of war, push pull game, thinking that, our lived experiences, define, everyone else's point of view. And, we have answers to things that some people may not know. Some people just need to be more educated. All those are really, in my view, they're really like demeaning areas, to assume that, those are the reasons why we have those divisions. When at the end of the day, it's really just opening that door, being willing to have tough conversations. That's part of, I think, what we're lacking, is that we, as a nation, we're unable to wrestle with like conflict and conflict resolution, of course, and Pat can talk to that about, when it comes to the international relations side, is essential, right? And that stems down even to everyone's personal daily lives. How can I become a better person myself, thinking intrinsically, having that emotional intelligence, but also recognizing that everyone else is thinking and walking the same thing. And I think everyone has that same goal. But most of the time people just don't feel heard. So having that open conversation, allowing people to speak and being better listeners as ourselves, and vice versa, we can get a lot done by just understanding different people's points of view, different cultures, different languages, different perspectives. And I know I myself have learned a lot in my interactions, just meeting a large set of diverse people from school, from work, from networking events, etc. So there's a lot that we can do, and it doesn't really take a lot of effort. It's pretty easy to have that mindset. We just have to be action oriented and have goals on how to achieve those.
Excellent. You hit the nail right on the head when it comes to being heard. And I think the podcast model really has taken off, maybe in a surprising way, because a lot of people might have thought that it was just like a form of radio, but invented or popularized in the 21st century. And I think it's become a lot more than that, because according to some stats, and the stats are updating all the time, but something like, I believe is like 80 or 90% of podcast listeners listen to entire podcast episodes or something like that. It's some kind of crazy number, but it just goes to show that this long form of content, when you can be doing something else while you're listening, or you can just sit back and relax and listen. There's all different kinds of ways that people can consume that content and be able to have other people be heard. I think that's been the kind of the barrier that's been broken down, which is, you don't need to have a TV screen to listen to someone, or like to maybe watch someone on the news or whatever. That's still something that people do. But now with podcasting, people can do all sorts of things and can do all sorts of things. So it's almost like there's no excuse to not listen to someone, almost. Because I listen to a lot of these episodes, but again, especially the interview ones, because I've got to put together the edits and whatnot. It's really interesting to see how it's like when you listen to it and then you listen to it second time, third time, you generate more ideas. You're like, oh, I actually agree with this person. I may not have agreed with this person when I first spoke to him or her, but now I do, or now I have at least have a fresh new perspective. So the podcast episodes, they're the reason why they're still out there, available for anyone to listen to at any time. All right, Pat. So you are the first one to be asked a question from me. So this is, again, the two truths, one lie format. So each of us will have an opportunity to answer a few sets of 2 truths, 1 lie questions. And it's just a great way to get to know one another. So, Pat, I will start with my first set of 2 truths, 1 lie. Number 1, I got a photo with Mark Hamill at a Star Wars showing in London. Number 2, I met a former chancellor of the University of Oxford. Or number 3, Princess Anne visited my dorm building.
Well, Sherman, these 3 questions, these 3 statements, rather, are really tough. One thing I know, you went to college in the United Kingdom. You lived in London for 3 years. Is that correct?
That's right.
Well, I would say it's very probable, it's likely that you met Mark Hamill. The second one was you met a former chancellor of the University of Oxford. You went to King's College, right?
Right.
Even though you went to a different college, I think it's likely that the former chancellor of Oxford University paid a visit to your campus. But I would rule out Anne's visit to your dormitory, since you are a male, and I'm not sure females are allowed to enter the premises of male dorms. So I would say your third statement is a lie.
All right, Pat. Well, that's a great answer, and it's true. This is kind of a UK based sort of set of questions. You are unfortunately incorrect. Princess
Oh my
Anne,
God.
yes. And now, just to clarify, the dorm was male and female, so it wasn't really like a college dorm, but it was kind of like that's how they would classify it, as like an apartment sort of style complex. But yeah, it's true. It is true though that Princess Anne did visit. Now I wasn't there; I was actually in school. But my friend, who was in part of the council or the little student council that helped run activities and events at the complex, he told me that Princess Anne, who has a connection as the kind of the royal head, if you like, of the University of London, she actually did pay a visit to this complex, which was a brand new complex at the time. And yeah, she did pay a visit, which I was just like, I don't know how they fit this sort of stuff into an itinerary for the royal family, but it was a nice building complex, and I'm glad. Hopefully, someone cleaned up before she arrived. Hopefully, it wasn't like an unexpected thing. But yeah, she actually got to meet Princess Anne, so it was pretty interesting. So, well, great thinking though, Pat. But Princess Anne did visit my dorm building. The lie in the set of 3 was I never got a photo with Mark Hamill at a Star Wars showing in London. I have met a former chancellor of Oxford. He was actually also the last governor of Hong Kong, and that was Lord Patton, Chris Patton.
Right.
And he spoke one time in San Francisco. I had a pleasure to meet him. Just a great gentleman, and he has a lot of great insight on how sad the situation is in Hong Kong. As the former last governor. But yeah, that's I mean, there you go. Some more fun facts, right? So, Pat, great first answer. And my American trivia question to you is: which founding father is often credited for introducing mac and cheese in the United States?
Well,
you're hungry. I know.
Yeah,
sorry, Christian. I already made you hungry too. This is
no, that's a joke I get frequently. Anyway, I love mac and cheese, and it's like a good side dish. One of the most liked side dish of mine. But I've never heard this story. I know Teddy Bear, and Roosevelt. I know Garfield, all kinds of presidents. But I've never heard which founding father introduced mac and cheese. Please tell me, Sherman.
Answer is Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, yeah, he loved the concept, and he kind of brought that concept to the the Americas at the time. Now, he didn't start craft or anything, but he was just too busy, reading or being president and all that. But yeah, he was. It was kind of a combination of, I think, combining his taste from Europe, the cheeses and whatnot, and bringing that to America. But yeah, mac and cheese. While he wasn't the inventor, clearly, but he was part of that early introduction of mac and cheese, and I think he if the mac and cheese was the only metric to determine how good a president was, I think Jefferson would definitely be at the top of the list for me.
From now on, whenever I walk into a restaurant, I want to order mac and cheese. I'm going to say, "Can I get Thomas Jefferson's favorite on the side?"
That's perfect, man. And all you got to do is just pay with a $2 bill, because that's the one with Jefferson on it. No matter how much they give you, just give them one $2 bill. That's it. That's all they get. Wonderful, Pat. All right, Christian, why don't what do you think would be set for you to ask set of three for Pat?
Yeah, definitely. I'm ready.
All right, fire away.
Okay, Pat. So my two truths and a lie. First one is I've been to over 20 countries across 3 continents. The second one is I have a pet Balinese cat named Cohiba. And then finally, my favorite Starbucks drink is a chai tea latte.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that you love maps, Christian. I think you were also a transportation enthusiast, right?
That's correct.
But I would say you have not been to 20 countries already. I think this just too many countries. Like most Americans do not travel that much abroad. So I would say that's the lie.
That's a intriguing guess. Unfortunately, that's incorrect.
Wow. So you're a world traveler, right?
Yeah. So kind of backstory to that, my father served over 30 years in the military in the Air Force. So we've lived in Japan, and we were in Germany for 5 years. And throughout all that time in Europe, we did a lot of traveling across the European continent, and then, of course, domestic travel as well back in the United States. So I've been fortunate to at least hit 20, which has been actually really phenomenal. I know a lot of people can't say that, so I'm pretty proud of that. The lie actually is I don't have a pet Balinese cat named Cohiba, but we do have a pet Victorian bulldog named Cassius. So.
Okay.
Wow. Oh,
well,
yeah.
Actually, so I made a mistake because I forgot. I had a conversation with Christian once it was a baseball game down in Austin in first grade. And Christian told me about his family's history and about all the travels he's done, but I just forgot it. So.
Oh, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, it's been fun. So.
Yeah, Christian, most important, did you get any frequent flyer miles out of that travel?
Most of that was done when I was still like in middle school, high school. So unfortunately, I don't have the personal credits to that. I think I got to give that to my father. But at least it has, enticed me to go back and start being the traveler again. Now that the world has opened up more than it has before. So I'm looking forward to that.
Even the Starbucks one, I was thinking like chai latte. I could definitely see that. There's something. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be in the future, there's some kind of matrix or some kind of way where you can tell, like, and maybe it's probably out there, some kind of way for people to predict your character or how you are based on the kind of Starbucks drink you get. But I'm not into those kind of algorithms or psychology. So, but yeah, awesome. Christian, do you have a American history trivia question, or do you want to pass on that? We just move on to.
Actually, I do have one.
Okay, good.
I guess, is this open to anyone, or is it just a Pat?
Just a Pat for now.
Okay, so for Pat, who in the United States is credited as the inventor of the traffic signal?
Oh my God. No, I don't know. Christian. I have no idea. Can I guess the century at least?
Yeah, that's fine. You can do that.
When I'm thinking about traffic signal, I'm not thinking about the contemporary current electronic traffic signal, but in general traffic signals, and it has to be the 19th century, right?
Correct. Yes, it is the 19th century.
Okay. Please tell me the name. Please tell me the name.
Yeah, it was like 1923. His name was Garrett Morgan, and he was an African American inventor. So you can credit, the next time you stop at a stoplight, you can credit that particular invention to a predominant African American historical figure, which is pretty cool.
Oh, good.
Wow, that's awesome.
Interesting.
I tell you, when I travel to some other countries, there's some countries I guess just have like very different concepts of traffic signals. You there is one thing I like when I went to Taiwan. When I go to Taiwan, what I like is how they have the timer on the traffic on the red light, so you can see how long you have to wait at a red light. I always thought that'd be a good idea, because no one wants to it's just sit around and get surprised by the green light, right, or something. I don't know. It's kind of like using the pedestrian crossing signal idea, but just put on to traffic lights.
Yeah, no, I've seen some of those as well with the countdown for the vehicular traffic, and I honestly think in the car-centric society that we live in the United States, would probably be very good at easing some of that road rage, waiting when the lights.
Yeah, they got one guy telling you how to drive, but there's still 10 seconds left. Don't wait 10 seconds, and then you can step on it. It's like a it's like I mean, definitely we don't want to put like a starting gun or anything like that. That's going to scare the heck out of people driving. But all right, awesome. So fantastic. So Pat, you've answered the two sets of questions. So Christian, why don't we have your turn? So I will ask you a set of my two truths, one lie. If I can pull up here. All right. So number one, I once got a behind-the-scenes tour of Hamilton. Number two, my podcast was almost called Hindsight's 2020. Or number three, I can list all the U.S. presidents and vice presidents in order.
Well, given the fact that I know you're a staunch history and American history buff, I feel like I'm pretty sure that you might have had the opportunity to do the backstage Hamilton. I really hope I'm not wrong. I'm correct on that. So, and then I also feel like, what was your number three again? Actually,
I can list all the U.S. presidents and vice presidents in order.
Right. I also think that you could totally do that. That seems like right up your wheelhouse. So I think that the name of the podcast being Hindsight 2020 is the lie.
Well, that's a really, really good guess. Unfortunately, you are not correct. It's a little tricky. This is a little tricky here. You were on the right track, though. You were on the right track. So number one is a truth. I did get a tour of the Hamilton stage in San Francisco because one of our tenants, like for one of our properties, she was in town for several weeks to help with the costumes at the Hamilton musical that was in town at the time in 2017. And we actually got to see the backstage, and see the costumes. We got to be on stage, which was amazing. And so that is the truth. And then the other one, you were so close. It was kind of a tricky one. I can list all the U.S. presidents, but I am not as good on the vice presidents in order.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I can name a lot of vice presidents, but for some reason I just struggle with the vice presidents in order. It's really, really hard for some reason.
Well, there have been administrations without vice presidents either. So I mean, even the count is already off compared to the amount of presidents we've had. So I think that would be a great skill for you to master. Honestly, I certainly can't name all the presidents, I think, in a row. So you got that beat.
Well, it's Actually the way I first remembered all the presidents in order was actually it was kind of like a challenge slash birthday gift for someone for my dad's friend. He said he would give me at the time it was Bush 43 was president, and so he would give me $43 if I can name all 43 presidents at the time, and so I did. And to this day, I can still list all the presidents very quickly in order. But the vice president never done a challenge on that, so. Yeah, one can't be perfect on American history, right?
I'm also very surprised you got the backstage with Hamilton, because getting those tickets alone are, that's the Willy Wonka golden ticket right there. So that's huge.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, it's just part of it is by chance, right? Like that tenant staying with us in downtown, or it's not with us in our home, but she needed a place to stay. She thought ours was pretty affordable, and it was just perfect timing. Coming back from my second year of college and to be able to see the performance, the songs kind of stuck in my head for a while. But yeah, it's a wonderful experience. So the only lie in there, the lie was the U.S. presidents and vice presidents in order. So the truth was that my podcast was almost called Hindsight's 2020, because it was 2020, and I was thinking, well, it would be nice to kind of look back in time to kind of see how we did or something. But that was literally one of the considerations for the name, and I'm glad I didn't pick it because it just wouldn't have had the same sort of name or connection after the year 2020.
You know what I will say though, that you should definitely still save that title. I think that's a phenomenal book title for maybe like an autobiography of your beginnings with the podcast. So I would keep that in the proprietary mode. I think that's a clever name.
It sounds good. Yeah, I'm definitely. I was just like, God, because I love that expression so much, right? Because it just fits so perfectly. And at that time, I'm sure now, especially nowadays, after 2 years of the pandemic, I'm sure a lot of people are just like, I would love to read a book about what we got wrong, what we got right in the last 2 years, because no one has any idea whatsoever. It feels like. All right. Well, anyway, those are my trips, but you are definitely on the right track. So got to give credit where it's due. So my trivia question is framed in a bit of a interesting way. So here it goes. Lucy Hale, the daughter of staunch abolitionist and U.S. Senator John P. Hale, was secretly engaged to what Civil War era man? And the hint is kind of like this man would be someone who most people would probably recognize in Civil War history.
Interesting. Okay. So obviously Civil War, we got a time period of the 1860s. Mm-hmm. Predominant, there's so many predominant historical figures of that time. Let me think. The start of the Civil War was in South Carolina, and I do know that, when that was the first state to secede.
Yep. I
also know that Senator John Calhoun was, at the time, I'm not sure if he was senator or if he was vice president, but I know he was associated with South Carolina. So I'm going to say John C. Calhoun.
John Calhoun. Well, that you definitely have the right kind of person. That she actually eventually got married. So I think it's a good trade. It's a good guess, I think, because Calhoun was a very, very influential guy. He was vice president under Jackson, I believe, and he was just very influential in the creation of the Democratic Party. While it's incorrect, I love that thinking. The answer is John Wilkes Booth, the assassin.
Interesting. I got the John part.
Yeah, that's right. You got the John part. But go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's fascinating. That's a fun trivia fact.
Yeah, not a whole lot of people know about John P. Hale. I don't know as much about him as I probably want to, but he was one of those guys who's just so well ahead of his time. He was thinking, about equal rights for everyone and all that, which was a huge, huge deal at the time. And he was a radical Republican and just a great guy. John P. Hale was a very well respected gentleman, but it's kind of surprising how his daughter was secretly engaged to John Wilkes Booth. and she actually never knew about John Wilkes Booth's hatred for Lincoln, which is kind of crazy. But there you go. I mean, love is really strange. It just crosses these weird lines. But I would obviously tell her to say that was a really bad idea. But I don't think he would have made a good husband and father anyway. So I'm just putting it out there. But yeah, it's weird. But it just goes to show. I mean, this is what history's all about. You never know who crossed paths with whom. But there you go. So anyway, great. That's a great attempt. I would have probably, if I didn't know anything about John P. Hale, I probably would have said someone like Calhoun or maybe like Robert E. Lee or something.
Right. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. All right. So I've asked questions to you, Christian. So Pat, it's your turn to ask questions for Christian.
Yeah. I got 3 statements for you, Christian.
Okay.
The first one is, as a kid, I was wanting to be a pilot.
Interesting.
The second is, I am fluent in German. And the third statement is, when I was living in Texas, I was driving a Chevy Impala.
Oh, dang. I should have paid more attention to the Bush School parking lot, Pat. Well, I do know, you're very international. I'm pretty confident that you speak multiple languages besides Hungarian and English, and I believe German would be one of those. So I don't think that's the lie. I'm trying to see. I'm gonna go with the pilot. I feel like that. I don't know. I don't think I would see you in that zone. So I'm gonna say that's the lie.
Well, it's false.
Dang it! I knew I should have gone with.
I don't speak German at all.
That's not even the one I thought was a lie.
Even though I have German ancestors, I don't speak German. I was wanting to be a pilot. And not only I wanted to be a pilot, I'm like an aviation geek and a transportation enthusiast, just as yourself.
Oh, no.
Yep. And I was driving a Chevrolet in Texas.
Oh, wow. I definitely have learned something new about you. This is great.
Pat, that's great. I did not know about the aviation part. I definitely, since Pat has given me a ride before to Easterwood Airport, he would refuse any future rides with me if I didn't know about the final one. Yeah, I can imagine Christian like just wander around the Bush parking lot in the future, just like keeping track of all the license plate numbers, like a traffic cop or something, like writing down like people's license plate numbers. You're guessing, you're putting together that whole puzzle, and maybe at some point, you're in class or something or wherever, and you recognize like you're the one with the green Jeep or something. You just shock people like, oh my God,
Oh wow, that's
that's great. Fantastic. So Pat, did you have a trivia question that you want to ask?
I do.
Okay.
This is gonna be easy for Christian, I think. My question is, when was Amtrak started?
That's actually a really good question. You would think that I would be, unfortunately, I'm not an Amtrak expert. I do know that the NEC, the Northeastern Corridor, is the predominant line that they have that goes from DC to Boston. But I feel like Amtrak. I think it was in 1970.
Well, you are very close. The actual number is 1972.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that was a good guess. I was also kind of guessing like around the Nixon era, because I know that Nixon was around that time when you had like the EPA forms and all that. Department of Transportation, I believe, was created at the end of Johnson administration, so in like '67 or something. I believe was something like that. But yeah, that's a great guess, Chris.
Yeah,
I would have
absolutely.
thought that Amtrak would have started even earlier because of like the fact that trains used to be, such a big part of. I mean, they still are. It's just like my understanding is that a lot more. There's still quite a bit of cargo that's being transported, whereas in Europe it's a lot more passenger oriented,
Passenger, right?
right?
Right.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah,
Fantastic. It's
good answer, Christian. Like 1970 is only like 2 years before the actual start date. So I think you answered the question correctly.
yeah, yeah,
We should accept that.
You gave me
yeah.
the on that one. Hey, I'll take it. If you accept, I'll take it.
It makes me wonder why we for the 50th anniversary. 50th anniversary this year is the 50th anniversary of Amtrak. I wonder if there's anything coming up. I would love to maybe at least have some of those Amtrak, maybe some more Amtrak memorabilia or something. That'd be kind of cool, like some model trains or toy trains or something. I always loved that as a kid.
Yeah. I think they do. I know they do like seasonal merchandise. They had like Amtrak sweaters. Like instead of Santa's sleigh, they had like a train being pulled from it. It's actually pretty funny. So they've done stuff like that in the past, but I'm sure they have probably some 50th anniversary, special of some kind.
That'd be funny to see Santa Claus on the government payroll. So I was like, oh, I never thought my tax dollars are actually paying for something useful. I'm just kidding. All right, fantastic. So, Chris, you've been asked the two sets, so I guess it's down to me at this point. So, why don't we start with back to you, Christian? So, why don't you ask me your set of two truths, one lie?
Okay, so for you, Sherman, I have number one is I love listening to jazz music. Number two is I swam with dolphins in Oahu, Hawaii. And the third one is I met Tom Cruise at the weekend opening of Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol.
Ooh, wow. That's interesting. Jazz? I've never snooped around in your iPod or your music library. So when I don't I can see dolphins for sure, especially with your travel to other countries. I'd be surprised if you hadn't met a dolphin of some kind. You certainly probably been to some kind of water park or even just like the natural lands. So I'm going to say number two is a true. So Tom Cruise, I can somehow I can see you meeting Tom Cruise at Mission Impossible. I feel Mission Impossible is one. It's hard to. I remember watching the old ones, like the '60s ones, but the movies, especially ones with Tom Cruise and with the show, I should say, the new show or the '80s, I believe it was like '80s show, '90s. They had movies. Um, I I don't see personally. I don't see you as a jazz person, but that's just my gut feeling. So I'm going to say number one is the lie in this set here.
This is the first time where you are spot on, Sherman.
Wow! Right.
So you take home the gold on that one. It's funny. So my younger brother is about to start college at the University of North Texas. He wants to study jazz studies with like a clarinet focus, and he's a musician. He's taught himself so many things. So he's the jazz lover in the family. I love soft rock music. I'm like a Billy Joel, Elton John lover in terms of like my genre. So you are absolutely correct. I'm not a big fan of jazz music, but it does has a relation in my family in some regards. So you got that right.
Wow. Well, wow, that's awesome. Good. I'm off to a good start, but that's cool. But obviously, you got to meet Tom Cruise, which has got to be a cool feeling, right?
Yeah, that's so interesting about that. So he's been a big supporter of the military. For those who didn't know, he does do a lot of traveling to military bases across the country and the world. And when we were stationed in Germany in Ramstein, which is kind of near the Frankfurt area, if you're familiar with German geography. He stopped by the base, and so we got my family and I got a chance to watch the opening weekend of that movie of Mission Impossible 4, and he actually was on stage before the movie started, and he was, kind of giving his support to the troops, and he was able to just like show his face to the whole crowd in the theater was applauding when he came in. So that was a pretty pinnacle moment. This was back in like 2011, so it was a while ago, but it was pretty cool that I can say that I met a pretty famous Hollywood actor.
Wow, that's awesome. Gosh, man, yeah, it's all about mission. Tom, I mean, it's already a mission impossible for people trying to meet Tom Cruise, and yet Chris doesn't want to. He gets to do that. That's awesome. I was actually kind of thinking about that too, like the military side of things. But I was just like, well, there's so many. Since we have so many bases, I was just like, oh, what are the odds that Tom Cruise would be, But if you would certainly, I can see though that it would make sense for him to be at that base, because from what I understand, that's. I mean, certainly because of Germany's proximity to Russia and just where it is in Europe, you would think that encounter would be pretty likely over there too, in one of those bigger bases, military bases.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome.
And
and
of course the dolphin piece, we did a trip to Hawaii, and that was a part of a package that I think we did as a family. So that was also pretty cool. Have some photos of swimming with some dolphins, which is another cool thing that people can say that they've done, which is pretty fun.
Oh yeah, I felt I've petted one of those dolphins too, and it's like the rubberiest animal out there. It's like holy cow, like you're feeling it, and this dolphin in particular could sing. Now the intonation not there, but for something where you could just wave your hands and the dolphin could start singing, it was actually pretty cool. So yeah, that was in Taiwan too. It was kind of cool to be a dolphin. So well, there you go. A lot of dolphin experience between us there.
Yeah.
All right, and now what's your American history trivia question? If you got one on
this one you probably actually might know, just because I don't know, I feel like you're pretty big with American history and whatnot. But who was the first president to establish the National Library?
Ooh, a National Library. My thing is FDR had a lot of issues with archiving things. So you said first president to have one, or first president to start, or like to start the process?
Start the process.
Start the process. Okay. So technically the National Library started with Hoover, because I mean, it was the predecessor, right? And I guess, Hoover wasn't that popular. So it's like, I still give him a library museum. What the heck, right? But so he would have been the first one to have one. But the start one, I believe it was FDR, when he put together a lot of those records and all that stuff. And he got the National Archives and the Library of Congress to really start this process of, and it wasn't until the 50s that they established it was like 55 or something, like a requirement for all records of the president and artifacts and all to be collected. So my answer is going to be FDR. It was the one who first started.
So you're incorrect.
Ooh,
but
wow.
It's actually, and he's probably one of the more unknown presidents, but it's Millard Fillmore, the 13th president of the United States.
Wow. Oh,
yeah,
yeah. Forget what I said.
Yeah, next to I think he did one of the compromises as well. But yeah, that's like one of the very few random facts I know happen about Millard Fillmore.
Wow.
But the guess is not a bad guess, honestly.
Wow. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, that's good. It's good news for Fillmore too, because I feel like Fillmore, it can be very much like a regionally known president, because Fillmore is from upstate New York, and the University of Buffalo was started by him. So if anyone out there is from the Buffalo area, you probably have heard his name around somewhere. But that's interesting. Yeah, and Fillmore just. I'm glad you added a fun fact for Fillmore, because he needs more of those. I mean, let's be honest here.
Yeah. Next time if someone asks about him, you say, "Hey, he founded the first permanent, White House library. So yeah, he probably began the first kind of the archives in that area. So
wow, interesting. Well, there you go. You got me. But that's a good one. I was thinking like. He's talking about presidential libraries and all that, but I guess Fillmore would be the one to really establish that sort of precedent for archiving things. Maybe for the White House Historical Commission too, which is in charge of documenting the history of the White House. Maybe he has some kind of role in that. All right, awesome. So let's go to Pat. So Pat, why don't you ask me a set of your two truths, one lie questions?
Well, the time has come, Sherman. The first statement I'm going to tell you is that I am the first one in my family to go to college. The second statement I have is I met with Hillary Clinton when I was 9. And the third one, I always listen to Bruce Springsteen when I'm driving on the interstate.
Ooh, wow. Okay. My thinking is that I didn't a second. So I'm since I'm not gonna be entirely sure what year Hillary would have seen it, but I'm guessing she would have been probably a first lady around that time. It's possible, and Clinton. I didn't ever see for some reason Clinton going to a place like Hungary, especially like in the wake of the collapse of the Soviet Union and whatnot. So I'm gonna leave that as a truth, like the second one. The third, I could definitely see Bruce Springsteen for number 3. So my guess for you, Pat, is that you are the first in your family to attend college.
Well, I have to disappoint you. It is false. I'm not the first one to go to college. But yes, I did meet with Hillary Clinton actually in New York City. And she was not there as first lady. Actually, she was still first lady, but she was running for U.S. Senate. And me and my family, we coincidentally like bumped into the march, and Clinton and her staff and colleagues were shaking hands with people, and we were there. Obviously, back then, as a kid, I didn't give a damn about Hillary Clinton, I still have the photo, and it was still a big life event,
Wow.
And just a few words about my driving habits. Yes, whenever I'm driving on interstate highway or a freeway in Europe, I always listen to Bruce Springsteen if I can.
Oh,
not a bad choice. He's a great guy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Music.
That's super cool. Well, there you go. That's awesome. Yeah, I was thinking like, God, what is that? Because I mentioned earlier that Pat has taken me on rides, all that. I believe there has been some music, but we just haven't driven long enough for me to tell what Pat listens to on the interstate, on the freeway, because Easterwood Airport, College Station Airport, is so close to the campus. It only the funniest thing was that Pat, one time you picked me up for the airport, and I was kind of rushing and all that. And he's like, "Oh, you can get there like 20 minutes before it takes off or leaves the gate." And that to me, as like a city person, that's unacceptable to me. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm sure for you, Christian, like if someone were to tell you like, "Oh yeah, Christian, you can just arrive in Dallas like 20 minutes before the flight takes off," you're like, "No way! Like I got to check in my bags, I got to do all this."
Yeah, I'm the guy who tries to get there early, like hours before the flight even leaves. So that does bother me.
Yeah, I remember the day. It was right before Christmas 2019.
Yeah.
And we were having breakfast at Cracker Barrel. And we were sitting at the table at 9. We still didn't get our checks. And your flight was about to leave in 45 minutes. And we still made it to the airport on time. So amazing. We love small airports.
Yeah, I know. That's what's interesting is that Reno Airport is a smaller airport. It's not Easterwood. It's not College Station. But it's one of those places where it's like you don't have to get there 2 hours before to catch a flight. and I know the traffic is really light, generally speaking, and so it's going to be a different experience. Yeah, we'll have to change planes and all that, but I got to tell you, and it's a bit of a divergence here, but since it's a aviation related question to, well, I guess to both of you now, but one thing I've noticed about flying is, at least here in the States, I don't mind direct flights because you just get from one place A to place B. But I'm starting to like some of those layovers, as long as you're not constrained, and as long as bad weather doesn't get in the way. I'm actually liking some of those connections because you take a break, especially with obviously before the mask mandate was lifted. The masks were required, and it's kind of nice to just kind of get off like the small enclosed space on the plane and walk around the airport or something, waiting for your connection. But yeah, I'll start get used to some of these small airports because with Alabama and everything, it's like Birmingham Airport. It's an international airport, but it's not JFK. But yeah, I mean, Christian, I'm curious to kind of know about you too. Like, are you more of a direct person, or are you actually like maybe some of these connections, and maybe in the process of getting to explore a bit more of the airport world over there?
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, as someone who really grew up as a kid loving the window seat and looking outside and flying, that's something I've also taken with me as an adult now. Like connecting flights for me, I always see as a experience to see a new city, or even if it's just like a quick 2-hour layover somewhere else. I'm also a huge nerd for airports, so like for me just to be out there and like see what the terminals are like. I'm a fan over that. My fiance may have other views. She really likes to just get from one place to another and not have the hassle. But yeah, I definitely do. I don't mind the extended layovers. I've done some red eye flights in the past, and some people don't like those either. But I think those are I don't know. Maybe that's just me being a little too nerdy, but who knows?
My guess is that Pat wants to start the first transatlantic flight from Nashville to Budapest.
Budapest.
Yeah.
There we go. We'll make
Christian told us he's a little bit nerdy. Let me tell you guys that for a long time, and I can say still, whenever I'm booking a flight, my top consideration is the type of the aircraft the flight is going to be. It's not the fare, it's not the itinerary. So I happen to like connecting flights, and I like layovers. To be honest, I prefer US airports than European airports because I think the amenities are more affordable there. And there's way more amenities, way more restaurants. But I still don't mind like connecting at Heathrow or Amsterdam. So personally, I don't want to have like a flight between Budapest and Nashville because it means like less capacity to experience air travel from getting on another plane, meeting people at the airport, the layover. So connecting at Frankfurt, Heathrow, or Amsterdam is still fine with me.
Yeah, that makes sense. At least you got to get some sort of Tennessee experience. I mean, one of the airlines that frequents San Francisco is Hawaiian Airlines, which is interesting because it's one of those airlines where it is a U.S. airline, but it's got at least what I heard, it's got a bit more of a Hawaiian theme, which is unique amongst airlines in general. I mean, certainly a lot of international airlines. There's some really cool ones. Japan Airlines is a good place. So is Singapore. I don't know if you guys have flown Singapore, but they treat you well. It's pretty cool. All right. I'm sorry, I deviated quite a bit there with flying, and we're just so excited with the summer. The summer's here already. But Pat, what is your American history trivia question that you like to ask?
Yep. So in what year was the last time the U.S. Congress formally declared war?
Wow. Ooh, this is a good one. Formally declared war. gosh, the definitely nothing before 1940, like 41 or whatever, because that would be declaration of war against Germany after, or declaration of war against Japan for sure, like 40, probably like it would have been like 42, or like December of 1941 after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. So definitely not before that. But then that doesn't really leave a lot of that still leaves a lot of decades between that. So I I would say Korean War. I'm trying to think like through the wars, right? But declaration of war. This is obviously an issue that a lot of constitutional experts have touched upon as a big problem, which is the inability for Congress to make a declaration of war, essentially. Um, but I've got a feeling I'm just not sure about it. Like if there was declaration for the second for the Iraq War, like in terms of Bush Jr. But I've got a feeling that there's declaration of war during Operation Desert Storm because of the invasion of Kuwait, with Iraq invading it. I could be way off. This is a really good one. So I'm gonna say that last declaration of war, I'm gonna guess would have been, and in terms of the year, I'm probably gonna be off. I'm gonna say 1991, which I believe was when the invasion was kind of at its peak. So I'm just gonna say 1991, but this is a really tough one here.
Well, your initial guess was right. It was during the Second World War, and the year is 1942, when Congress declared war on Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania. This was the last
Wow.
time. This was the last time of formal war declaration.
Oh yeah, I went. I should have gone with my guts.
Yep.
Dang! Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. That makes it. I was. That's why I was like, because I felt like they didn't declare war during the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Um, but I was the reason why I was thinking Desert Storm was because of that like coalition. I was thinking maybe the Congress had to declare war so that the other countries could get on board. But that's interesting though. That's oh man, I was so
Yeah. So
close.
the fact is, Congress authorized war for Desert Storm, for Iraq, Korea, Vietnam, but it was not a formal declaration.
Mm,
This is why, like many
yeah.
like libertarians or constitutional conservatives, attack this way of warfare without formal declaration.
Yeah, and I think it's a very interesting topic because there's not only the element of sending troops to battle and to combat, but it's also it's just part of the broader debate on understanding what the powers are of the executive and legislative branch. There's so much, understandably, the operational side of things have to be on the executive side, but there's still that critical element of the Congress being having that authority to declare war, which is I think has been, and people obviously can have their agreements and disagreements, but I think it's largely been ignored over the last several decades. I think that, but the big thing I hoped, and I want to get your thoughts on this is, Pat, since you asked the question, but I just hope that the big challenge I would say is the ability to have any kind of oversight on defense, because it's such a large lobbying industry. It's such a large industry in general, with all those jobs and all those contracts and whatnot. That it can be very difficult to find out what a declaration of war would encompass, or at the very minimum, there should be some kind of oversight on just counting the pennies. I mean, we've spent a lot of money over the last 2 years, right? And so there's I hope that there's more of an appetite for in the future. Maybe our generation is going to be part of that, where there's going to be some kind of call for an increase in scrutiny on what is being spent, because when you've got things like, pandemic fraud and all that stuff happening on very, very large scales. Well, it has nothing to do with defense, but I'm just saying that I wonder how that's going to fit in maybe in the future when it comes to American politics on the issue of defense and of defense oversight. But Pat, if do you have any thoughts on just in general about this question of declaration of war or something that you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think I agree with your thoughts. I have to say that in terms of international law, whether Congress authorizes war or declares war, or the president starts war with executive action, I think this is irrelevant in terms of international law. This is more like the domestic affair of the United States. But talking about scrutiny and talking about constitutional affairs and constitutional aspects of this, I think it would be a better option to formally declare war. Obviously, it's not as easy as it used to be, because since the United States has been a superpower, sometimes the president and the Pentagon has to act quickly. So there's no time to go to Congress. But I think in case of a large scale military operation, at one point, Congress should be able to declare officially.
That's great points. And Christian, one thing I want to add and want to get your thoughts on is the one thing that we've learned from the Russian invasion of Ukraine is that logistics is almost everything. I mean, firepower is certainly huge, right? To have infantry, to have these people, but as General Pershing put it in World War One, you saying something. I can't get the quote exactly here, but he said something like, "Infantries win battles, logistics win wars." And I'm interested. I'm not an expert on transcom or anything, but one of the things that we touched upon in our episode a while back was just about the interstate system, and I'm curious to kind of see how that defense industry, transportation sector, how that's going to play out in the future, because it might be a bit more intermingled than we can imagine now, especially with the new technology with AI, because the defense has a lot of new priorities on that. What are your kind of thoughts on the future of AI, of the transportation sector and the technology there, and the defense side of things, especially in the wake of what's happening in Ukraine?
Oh yeah, definitely. Thanks for that question, Sherman. So, I mean, we faced a lot of supply chain issues in the past, I guess, several months now. The U.S. DOT has been really trying to close some of those gaps, and then, of course, when the crisis in Ukraine, really, kind of spurred out. Of course, we've all seen gas prices go, off the chain, and so it really puts into perspective, the domestic and international gameplays that go with, just getting oil and using our supply chain methods with our shipping, and how we get that across the country, and how that actually plays a role in prices and procurement and all those other factors. I think AVs and intelligent transportation systems has definitely been a conversation for many years. We were living in a time where we might be able to automate some of our commercial trucking, across the country. You talked about the interstate system. It's a network for the nation. But there are definitely ways to capitalize on improving some of the efficiencies of that. And there have been some talks about how can we make our commercial 16, 18 wheeler capacities to run more smoothly and reach higher areas when we have these supply chain issues. And part of that is building a network that is sustainable for that. So I think it's ambiguous now as we really try to decipher what the future of mobility will be, whether that's in sustainable modes, electric vehicles, AI technology. But at the end of the day, it really stems out, if we don't have the logistics, and the supply chain management and kind of the top level approach down quick, we really can't address the other factors. And so I think it really has to come from a top-down approach. All governments, federal, local, state, and regional bodies, we need to collaborate to make sure we can understand, how they fit, because, like the United States is like many other places, it's very regionally, separate in a lot of senses. And so we have to make sure that we are providing the tools necessary that makes it very ubiquitous for the entire country to flow and make sure we can capture all sides depending on which direction we move in the future.
Those are great points, and I love how after with this trivia and everything, we're able to get into some things that we normally don't talk about on other episodes. But this is great, and I like how you're integrating these sectors. It is going to, I think, going to take a top down. I can certainly tell you that in Nevada, where we have so much land, and I mean, 90% of Nevada is owned by the federal government. I'm just saying, that's kind of how big of a place it is. And while there's kind of the whole idea of public access and everything, but in terms of capabilities, that's one thing that I hope maybe Nevada can be a part of, which is being able part of the manufacturing and all that. When we see supply chains that can be interrupted because of authoritarianism or authoritarian behavior, I think it makes us rethink, think about how much easier it is. And I know that there's people thinking about labor costs and all that. I get that. But think about how much easier it is when you've got things that are always happening around the world and everything. But then you've got this issue where if you can't even get your ships in, you can't get this and that. Well, we want to improve those things, but it could be a lot easier. Maybe we could just say, hey, we got a factory in Nevada, or we got a factory here. We can make some stuff here in case something were to happen. Or maybe these parts, because of national security reasons, we got to protect our technology. We got to protect our assets. So anyway, I'm just floating out possibilities. There's a lot of, hope that a lot of different states can play some kind of role in the manufacturing and the technological advancements on transportation, all that. I think we'll definitely need to do that. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very challenging, especially with national security implications and whatnot. Gentlemen, we are getting close to the end of our episode, and this has been, I think, a wonderful just opportunity to get together and to get to know one another. Right? It's not often that we have these kinds of episodes, and I learned a little bit more about you guys, and you never know, right? You never know when what sort of fun facts someone has until you get to episode 100s, right? So, I want to take this opportunity now before we close. I'll start with you this time, Christian. I'll end with Pat here for this segment. For Christian, what sort of any final words that you want to leave just about episode 100, or just really about the podcast in general, and anything you like to say, also leave to people who are, as we transition to this new schedule here, any kind of thoughts you have about our episode and the way forward.
Yeah, certainly. It's been such a joy. This, like you mentioned, Sherman, this has been a different kind of episode. Your podcast is very informational based. You kind of get into the nuts and bolts of really descriptive topics. But it is nice. It is a breath of fresh air to just kind of have fun, for the first time, and like you mentioned, right, I got to know you and Pat a little bit more, on a personal level, despite, some of the silly banter of some of these truths and lies that we were doing. It really, it brings kind of that personal humanity to that, and to kind of tie it all to what we talked about earlier with civility is it's just that, like having the chance to really discuss, difficult, complicated topics, but at the end of the day, going back and kind of going straight into just the general, let's get to know about you guys and just have a good time. And so, if there's anything I wanted to say is I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Episode 100 is a huge milestone, and you should be very proud of the podcast you've created and the relationships you've been able to curate because of it. Also, a huge congratulations to you, Sherman, for your next adventure at the University of Alabama, Roll Tide. PhD in political science. I look forward for not only our friendship to to continue. But I'll be calling you Dr. Tylawsky for after you graduate. So I hope that doesn't you got to get used to that name.
Thank you so much, Christian. It means a lot to me, and you've once again been such a staunch supporter of the show, and it really requires a village to put something like this together. You can't just do it alone. You've got to have a good support system, and you've been part of that. You've been a big pillar of this podcast, and I can't thank you enough. And I'm really excited for this new journey in Alabama, where no matter where I am, there's still going to be recording sessions and all that. So that's not going to change. But I'm glad that you've been along with us this entire time, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much, Christian. Pat, I'll leave the rest to you. Any final words you'd like to leave for the audience as we wrap up our episode this time?
Yeah, Sherman. So I want to thanks for the invitation and the opportunity to be able to be on your 100th episode of your podcast. I think the first time you mentioned about the plan to launch such a podcast was about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less. I always thought that you're going to be successful in this endeavor, but I never imagined that you're going to make it to a 100th episode only in like 1.5 years. So I want to congratulate you on that. You were able to start and pursue this project during really tough times. So good job, Sherman. The other thing I want to mention is that I'm really proud to call you a friend, not only because you are smart and you're a good company and you're going to be a successful PhD student, but because you are one of those young Americans who are really committed to bring people together, to educate people, and to make the United States an even better country. So I'm really happy to be a founding father and a friend in your podcast. I really enjoyed the trivia question game we had. I enjoyed the company I had this morning, if you consider your guys' time zones. I want to wish you luck with your next endeavor in Alabama. And I also want to I want to make sure that I'm going to be available for further episodes on your podcast or further special events whatsoever. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Pat. And I also value our friendship extremely well. And you've been alongside with this show as well from day one. And just to emphasize, how much you guys have been with us. I mean, it was indeed 2 years ago, and that time, just 2 years ago, didn't even have a title, didn't have anything, didn't have a logo, didn't even have this microphone that I'm using right now. So a lot of things have changed, but I'm just so grateful to see that journey and the amount of support, honestly, and there's no words to really describe it. This is something where you just have to keep at it. And while we do have a new schedule and whatnot, but the quality episodes, I can tell you, are going to be even better. We're going to improve. We're going to be going in a new direction, but we're sticking with those principles. We're still looking for those elements of civility and of unity, of fiscal responsibility, or of patriotism. Then those are still there, and I cannot wait for new content. You guys obviously have been absolutely incredible, not just with the episodes, but just I think something like this is really fun, and just when I provided the outline or provided the game plan, there was nothing really content related that I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to get that opportunity to have everyone here listening and us talking, getting to know one another. That's the main thing. So once again, Pat and Christian, thank you both so much for joining me for episode 100. we've got a lot more special landmarks or milestones, I should say, down the line. And I hope that all of you listening will join us as we proceed onwards from episode 100.
Thanks so much, Sherman. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was my conversation with Pat and Christian. Just a wonderful time to get to know one another and to even more and to catch up a little bit. It's been a while since we've all seen each other in person since graduation 2020. Now, I want to make one final announcement before I wrap up this celebratory episode 100. For 2 years, we've had audio, we've had a little bit of video, depending on whether some people are tracking some of the other interviews that I've done relating to Friends and Fellow Citizens, or at least mentioning Friends and Fellow Citizens. We haven't had anything tangible, and I really wanted to find something very special for all of you, and just the way that we can remember Friends and Fellow Citizens and I would say, I'll put it in this way, to be able to enjoy Friends and Fellow Citizens in a different way. And I am very, very happy to announce that to coincide with episode 100, I'm announcing the first ever Friends and Fellow Citizens mug available for purchase. It is a wonderful new item now available, and not only is it going to be part of the merchandise of the podcast, but for those who are signed up for the Patreon account for the $25 per month option, you will get a complimentary Friends of Fellow Citizens mug. And for a limited time, the first 50 Friends and Fellow Citizens mugs will include a personalized note from myself. I cannot wait to really see this now coming to fruition. What's great about the mugs, they are made in the USA, made in St. Paul, Minnesota, made by Deneen Pottery, which is a fantastic, highly American small business, founded by a wonderful family, very, very innovative in the pottery world. It is also the same company that makes mugs for Mount Vernon, the home of George Washington. And so make sure to get your hands on this incredible mug, which is going to come in 2 different patterns. They are going to be available starting on August 1st. Shipping will be first come, first served. I am just so thrilled to now be able to offer Friends and Fellow Citizens and as part of your favorite beverage. And so I'm really just, again, so incredibly grateful to the people at Deneen Pottery, but also, again, the hard work that we've been able to do over the last 2 years for the last 100 episodes. So this is a wonderful time. This is a great way to support the show, but also more importantly, this is, I believe, a great reward for our listeners. And it is a piece of Friends of Fellow Citizens, but it's also a piece of America. It's a piece of handmade pottery with every single mug unique. Literally, every single mug that is made in Deneen Pottery, because of the way that they make the mugs, every single one is different than the other. That is very, very key to Friends of Fellow Citizens. Each and every single one of you is incredibly unique. Every one of our episodes is unique. Uniqueness is at the core of this podcast. And with that, thank you so much for listening to episode 100. Be sure to check out more news about the mug, and it'll be available as a link to be able to order on our website, shermantylawsky.com. It'll also be available on the George Washington Institute website, georgewashingtoninstitute.org. I'll be sure to have those available up and ready on August 1st when we start our new schedule. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and to subscribe to our email list if you'd like to get more notifications. I will see you for the solo episode next week, and then we will kick off our new schedule. First 2 episodes of each month will be the first 2 Mondays. First will be an interview, second will be a solo episode. Be sure to join us. Let's keep going for another 100 episodes. Have a great rest of your day and rest of your week, and remember, a day in America is always better when we are with our friends and fellow citizens.